The first time it happened, Eliza almost dismissed it. A dream, perhaps, or the old building settling, but the sound was distinct. 3 sharp knocks. Bang, bang, bang. She glanced at her clock. The red numbers glowed. 3:33 a.m., precisely. A strange time for a visitor. A shiver traced its way down her spine, cold and unwelcome. She listened intently. Silence returned, heavy and absolute, just the hum of the ancient refrigerator in her small kitchen. She told herself it was nothing. It had to be nothing. Eliza lived alone. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of the Blackwood building, an old structure full of shadows and whispers. Some said it was haunted. Stories clung to its bricks like ivy, of strange noises, of things moving on their own, of a presence felt but never seen. The hallways were long and dim, the paint peeled in sad strips, floorboards creaked with every step. It was cheap, that's why she lived there, but sometimes the atmosphere felt too heavy, too watchful, too real. The next night it happened again, the same 3 knocks, sharp, deliberate, bang, bang, bang. Eliza sat bolt upright in bed, her heart hammered against her ribs. 3:33 a.m. Again, exactly. This was no dream, this was real. She crept out of bed. Her feet were bare on the cold wooden floor. She tiptoed to the front door. Peeking through the peephole, the hallway was empty. Dark, silent, just the flickering, anemic light bulb at the far end. Who could be knocking at this ungodly hour, and why? A creeping dread began to coil in her stomach. Was someone playing a prank? It felt too precise for a prank, too unnerving. The building was full of strange sounds. Old pipes groaned like dying beasts. The wind whistled through loose window frames, but these knocks were different. They were intentional. They were for her. She felt it deep in her bones. Sleep became a fragile thing, easily shattered by the anticipation of that specific dreaded minute. The minute the knocking would begin. The 3rd night, the knocks felt louder, more insistent, as if the knocker was growing impatient. Bang, 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 3:33 a.m. Eliza gasped, pulling the covers up to her chin. Her eyes darted around the darkened room. She felt a presence, an unseen watcher. The air in her apartment grew cold, so cold. Goosebumps erupted on her arms. Sleep was now a distant memory. She lay awake for hours, listening, waiting, fearing the silence as much as the sound. The silence meant it was coming. She tried talking to her neighbors, Mrs. Henderson on the 2nd floor, old Mr. Gable across the hall. They heard nothing, nothing at all. They looked at her with pity, or perhaps suspicion. "Are you sure, dear?" Mrs. Henderson had asked, her voice kind but her eyes doubtful. Eliza felt increasingly isolated, alone with this terrifying, unexplained phenomenon. The Blackwood building seemed to hold its secrets tight. Its other tenants were oblivious, or perhaps they too had secrets they didn't share. This building felt like a trap. Eliza desperately sought a rational explanation. Loose shutters in the wind, but her windows faced the quiet courtyard. Animals? Unlikely on the 3rd floor. And the timing? Always 3:33 a.m. It was too precise, too methodical. Pranksters seemed the most logical, but who would be so persistent, so cruel? The dread was a constant companion now, a cold knot in her chest. It followed her through her days, it haunted her nights. Her once cozy apartment now felt like a prison cell. She was a prisoner of fear. She decided she needed proof, evidence, something to show the police or a paranormal investigator, or even just to prove to herself she wasn't losing her mind. She bought a small, cheap digital camera, one that could record video. She positioned it on a bookshelf, pointing directly at her front door. If something was knocking, the camera would see it. It had to. She needed to understand what was happening. This was her only hope. To fight back against the unknown, to reclaim her sanity. The next morning, Eliza eagerly checked the camera footage. Her hands trembled as she played it back. Hours of grainy, silent video. Then around the 3:30 a.m. mark, the image flickered. Static filled the screen, just for a few minutes, right when the knocks would have occurred. When the image returned, the time was 3:37 a.m. The critical moments were gone, corrupted, unusable. But through the static, she thought she saw something, a flicker of movement, a deepening of the shadows near the door, or was it just her tired eyes playing tricks? The knocks did not stop. Night after terrifying night, bang, 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 always at 3:33 a.m. The sound seemed to mock her, to challenge her. Eliza was a wreck. Her nerves were frayed. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She jumped at every creak, every sigh of the old building. The Blackwood felt alive, and it was watching her. waiting. She was being worn down, stripped of her courage, but beneath the terror a spark of defiance began to glow, a desperate anger. She couldn't live like this. She wouldn't. She made a decision, a reckless, desperate decision. Tonight she would not hide. She would not cower. When the knocks came, she would open the door. She would confront whatever entity was tormenting her, human or otherwise. She had to know. The not knowing was worse than any monster she could imagine. She spent the day preparing herself, trying to build up her courage. What would she find? A person, a ghost, or something far stranger? Something unimaginable. Fear was a bitter taste in her mouth. As night fell, the apartment grew colder than ever. An unnatural chill permeated the air. Eliza sat on her sofa, staring at the front door. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. 3:30 a.m. The digital clock on her cable box glowed. 3 minutes. The silence in the apartment was deafening. She could hear her own ragged breathing. Her hands were clammy. She clutched the small, heavy flashlight she'd placed beside her. Ready. Or as ready as she could ever be, waiting for the inevitable. 3:33 a.m. Right on schedule. Bang, bang, bang! The knocks were sharp, demanding, impatient. This was it. Adrenaline surged through Eliza. She sprang from the sofa. Fumbled with the locks, her hands shaking violently. She took a deep breath. And then she flung the door wide open, expecting to see someone. Something. Anything. But the hallway was empty. Utterly empty. The dim light flickered. Silence pressed in. A wave of despair washed over her. Was she truly going mad? Had it all been in her head? Then she looked down. Her breath hitched. There, on the dusty wooden floor of her own apartment, inside her apartment, were footprints. Not human footprints. They were too long, too thin, with an odd claw-like shape at the toes. They started just inside her doorway, as if whatever made them had passed right through the closed door, or had been invited in. They led away from the door, towards her living room, towards the darkest corner of her home. Her blood turned to ice, a whisper, so faint, so cold, it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It brushed against her ear like an icy breath. You opened the door. The voice was not human. It was ancient and filled with a chilling amusement. Eliza froze. Terror, absolute and paralyzing, gripped her. She couldn't scream, she couldn't move. She could only stare at the footprints leading into the shadows that now seemed to deepen, to writhe, to welcome its new guest. The next morning, Eliza's apartment was found empty. The door was slightly ajar, no sign of struggle, no note, just an unnatural chill in the air, and the faint, strange footprints on the dusty floor, leading from the door into the shadows. She was gone. Vanished. The Blackwood building stood silent, guarding its secrets. Another story absorbed into its ancient bricks, and sometimes late at night, if you listened very carefully, you could almost hear a faint, cold whisper echoing in the empty rooms, waiting for the next knock.